Greetings, I'm the Bulgarian Troglodyte. In this video, I'm gonna answer these movie-related questions that I found online. I really enjoy doing these questionnaire videos, so every time I find one of these, I kind of feel like making a video. So I think I did one questionnaire from this kind of English learning website, but that was about music. So today the topic is about cinema. There are lots of very standard questions about cinema here, but then there are some more interesting questions as well. But I have, of course, answered some of the very standard questions on my channel before, but I think there were some questions here that I have never really considered on my channel, so those will be more interesting. And of course, let me know your answers to these questions. And if you have a YouTube channel yourself, you can make a response video too. I would love to see that. And I would love to see more of this type of stuff in YouTube in general. But anyway, let's start. I also have a letterbox open here if I need it for something. Yeah. But the first question is, what is the best movie you have seen recently? So I've been watching lots of trashy movies recently, like Cruel Intentions and John Tucker Must Die, and the two Princess Diaries films and Freaky Friday and stuff like that. But I think the best film I watched recently was in like the late February, and it's the new Mike Lee film Hard Truths, and I really connected to that film. I think it's probably one of Mike Lee's best films, probably maybe even his best film since like Secrets and Lies, and it's definitely a return to form. But yeah, that film really impacted me emotionally. It was surprisingly funny as well, even though it's very depressing and serious for the most part, but at the same time, there's just so much humor in that. And I think many people might find the lead character like very annoying and obnoxious, but to me she was really funny. And also I can relate her to many people I have met throughout my life, so that was interesting as well, but such a great movie. Yeah. Then number two, what movie never fails to make you happy? Well, there are of course many films that I could go with. I guess I would maybe say The Big Lebowski. That's a film that I have watched like a dozen times, and it always makes me laugh, and it's always on my mind. And I often just watch some of those like scene compilations on YouTube as well. Mostly the Walter Sobchak scenes, as I think it's John Goodman is the highlight of that movie instead of Jeff Bridges. Yeah, so that's one. The number three, have you ever seen a movie that made you cry? Well, plenty of them have made me cry, and there are some movies that kind of continuously make me cry, like The Emperors of Cherbourg. I have seen it 4 times, and 3 out of those 4 times I cried, I think, and it has been different scenes that I've cried to, like the gas station scene I've cried to a couple of times. Then when Guy leaves on the train, that was the scene that I cried to last time. When they, I think they say that "Je t'aime, mon amour, je t'aime, mon amour." It's so beautiful. Yeah. But yeah, there have been many films that I have cried to, especially actually as I've grown older, because I used to kind of have that belief that men shouldn't cry, but I don't think that anymore. So I kind of let myself tear up if I want to. Yeah. But number four, what is your favorite movie of all time? No, well, I actually just mentioned it. The Emperors of Cherbourg is probably my favorite film of all time, or Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. It's one of those two. Number five, is there a specific film that everyone loves, but you can't stand? I mean, there are so many of them. Like, again, I always say Saving Private Ryan and Die Hard. I think that's something that people are always very surprised about when you say that you don't like Die Hard because everybody loves it, but I just don't enjoy it. I like the more kind of less serious and more muscle bound and more homoerotic American action scenes, action movies. And Die Hard, I mean, it's not like a bad movie, but I kind of just really hate it in a way. Yeah. Number six, what is your favorite movie genre? Well, I don't really have one necessarily, but I would say like drama or romance. I love those types of films, and then the kind of slice of life, relationship type of films I tend to love the most. And that's the type of stuff I look for the most. But of course, there are great movies in every single genre, even the genres that I like less. Number seven, is there a film genre that everyone loves but you can't stand? Well, there isn't a genre that I can stand. Well, maybe biopics are. I usually hate biopics, although it's mostly the kind of American Oscar bait type of biopics that I absolutely hate and loathe because they are just soulless and boring and not very interesting. Yeah, so biopic probably would be the closest that I can stand. Yeah. Number eight, why do certain genres of films appeal to you more than others? Well, I think uh, in certain genres there are just more great films than in other genres. Like the balance of great and bad films is different in different genres. Like I think in horror genre, for example, there are some really great horror films, but I think the average horror film is just so bad compared to some other genres. And of course, I just like the aesthetics more in certain genres. The subject matter just is something I relate to more, and I'm just interested in relationships and people, and I have a very idealistic view on love and stuff like that. So that's why, for example, romance really speaks to me. Yeah, but yeah, that's enough of an answer. Yeah, and it's a bit of a hard to answer that in a very deep way. But yeah, number nine, who is your favorite actor or actress? Well, I pick one for both. Tatsuya Nakadai for actor. Probably if I had to choose one, I would go with him. And then for actress, maybe Catherine Deneuve comes to mind. Or Liv Ullmann. Yeah, maybe I would have to go with Liv Ullmann actually if I just chose one. But yeah, of course there are many actresses and actors that I like. Number 10, do you prefer going to the cinema or watching movies at home? Well, I don't really go to the cinema anymore, but I used to go to the cinema a lot. For example, when I lived in London, and then I kind of had a routine that I went to the cinema pretty much every week, sometimes even multiple times a week. Although I mostly watched classic films, although I went to see quite a lot of new films as well. But I think after COVID happened, I just haven't been able to get myself back to the routine of going to the cinema. And it has gotten quite a bit more expensive as well, and I have a very small budget, so I wouldn't want to kind of use my money to at least see anything kind of very average. So it would need to be something really good that I would go to see. And I live in a like a mid-sized city, so that there are a couple of cinemas here, and you can see some classics as well. There's one cinema in my university where you can see some good stuff, but while I'm very adventurous when it comes to exploring art and stuff like that, but when it comes to these types of real life things like going somewhere, I'm very kind of routine based with those due to some anxieties and stuff. So when I'm kind of not used to not going in the cinema, it's kind of hard for me to start going again. But I think if I ever move to Helsinki, for example, I will probably start going to the cinema more often, but we'll see. And again, now that I have a 65-inch TV at home as well, I just feel less the need to go to the cinema, even though obviously the cinema experience is great, but I also love just being at home. I'm very much the type of person who loves being at home because at home you kind of can be yourself 100% and can feel comfortable 100%. So yeah, but I kind of love both going to the cinema and watching movies at home. Again, BFI South Bank in London was kind of like a second home to me. Yeah. Number 11, what was the last movie you watched in theaters? Well, it was Aki Kaurismäki's newest film, Fallen Leaves. And that was actually at the cinema that was basically in my university. So that was a really fun experience. Obviously, I'm a big Kaurismäki fan. He's my favorite director alive now that David Lynch died, sadly, recently. So yeah, that was a good Experience. Yeah, I watched it with a couple of people I know from the university. So yeah. 12. What has been your favorite movie going experience? Well, there have been a few, like seeing 2001: A Space Odyssey in 70 mm in BFI South Bank. Definitely was a highlight. Then in that same room, I saw Once Upon a Time in the West, and that was such a mind-blowing experience, especially because before that, I actually didn't like the film that much, but then when I saw it again in the cinema, it kind of completely blew me away. Then also in that room, I saw Hitchcock's Vertigo, so that was one highlight. Yeah, so those are some. Oh, and I saw Mulholland Drive in the Prince Charles Cinema, and I had a great seat in the middle, and nobody was sitting next to me or in front of me, so that was kind of a perfect experience. Yeah. Then number 13, do you like watching foreign films? No, well, you know the answer to this. Yeah, I prefer watching foreign films to English language films. So yeah. Number 14, do you watch foreign films in their original language or dubbed in your native language? Well, I watch them in the original language, but of course I have seen some dubbed versions as well throughout the years. And then when it comes to animation, I mostly watch, for example, anime in Japanese, the original language, but then there are like a few exceptions where I prefer the English dub, like for example with Dragon Ball. And I've also just like with some of those like very battle type of anime, I've watched them with English, but I would say 90% of the time I watch them in original Japanese, and sometimes I kind of test both Japanese and English and see which one I prefer. Yeah. Number 15. What do you think of remakes of classic films? No, well, they tend to be really awful, and usually they are worse than the classic films. But of course, there are times when like a remake can be like good or sometimes even better than the classic film. But that pretty rarely happens. Yeah. Then number 16. What are some great movies to watch with friends? Well, that's a good question. Well, I tend to watch films alone, but I have a friend who I used to watch lots of films with in this room, in fact. But yeah, these days we usually meet uh like in the city center and stuff. And actually, I hadn't met him in a while, but we just recently reconnected last week, so that was nice. But anyway, I don't usually watch films by myself. But what are some great movies to watch with friends? Well, with him, I showed him some David Lynch films, and that was quite a lot of fun. Like showed him Eraserhead, Lost Highway, Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me. So I think those types of films are can be quite a lot of fun to watch with friends because there's so much to discuss after. But also another answer that one can give here is just watching something that's like really fun. Of course, well, I mentioned the Big Lebowski earlier. I think that would be lots of fun to watch with friends. And then there are actually some TV shows that I really love that I would love to watch with someone like Gilmore Girls and the OC or the OC. Like again, my friend Tony is also a fan of those shows, and but I would love to watch them with him. But obviously we live in different countries, so that's not really possible. Although who knows me in the future? Yeah, but yeah, that would be cool to watch those shows well, with Tony or with somebody else who kind of really loves those shows as well. I would just love to kind of make fun of them and stuff like that. Yeah. And then 17, what do you think makes a great movie? Well, I often say this that like a truly a great film or a masterpiece, it kind of needs to excel at all or most of the kind of different categories. So it needs to have good aesthetics. It needs to say something interesting about the world or about humans or whatever. And yeah, it needs to have good performances and good kind of other elements as well. But there are certain movies that are, for example, purely a kind of a visual experience where kind of the narrative doesn't matter as much. So in those cases, just having a beautiful aesthetic can make that movie a great movie. But I think usually the greatest movies kind of excel at everything. Like the human condition, for example, it has beautiful cinematography, it has a great story that tells us a lot about the human condition. It has great performances, great characters, very deep characters, good character development. Yeah, so that kind of movie just excels at everything. So yeah. Number 80, would you rather watch a classic film or a modern one? Well, generally I obviously prefer watching classic films. Again, my favorite decade of cinema is the 60s. I think that was just kind of the peak creativity for cinema. But of course, I still like to watch newer films as well, even though it just feels like cinema is getting worse and worse all the time. Although it's mainly that American cinema is getting worse, but I think, for example, in Asia, there are still lots of great filmmakers working today. Yeah. Number 19, what is the most underrated movie you have watched? Well, this is always hard. Like, what is the one most underrated movie you have watched? And also the word underrated can be a bit weird because there are some films that are very unknown. Not many people have watched them, but the people who have watched them really like them usually. So are those films underrated or are they unknown? So I usually tend to have more answers when we think about unknown rather than underrated. Yeah, well, there's this Georgian movie, The Plea, that's very kind of unknown and I guess underrated because I think it's kind of Tarkovsky level and it's kind of that type of filmmaking as well. But not many people know about it, but I mentioned it in my recent video. Yeah. And another one I would mention is like Open Coupe by Guy Gilles. It's a French New Wave masterpiece and it's not really talked about. Yeah, people just talk about Godard and Rivette and Truffaut, etc. But I think the Guy Gilles film is as good as any of the great movies from the more famous directors of that time. 20, do you like watching movies based on true stories? Well, if the movies are good, I don't mind if they are based on true stories or not. I mean, this type of question isn't something that really interests me. I like great movies, and some of them are based on true stories, and some of them aren't. Yeah. 21, how do you feel about film adaptations of books? Well, often they are good, often they are bad, but I think if we didn't adapt books into films, well, the cinema history would be pretty poor and it would be way worse than it is now that many films have been adapted or many books have been adapted to books. So I think uh, it's good that we adapt books to films. And it's always interesting, like if you have read a book and then you watch the film, it's always interesting to see another take of that story. And it's the same with like manga and anime. Yeah. Number 22. Do you like watching films with a lot of special effects or films that rely more on the story? Well, I mean, if something has lots of special effects, it doesn't mean that it doesn't rely on the story. I mean, I think this is pretty stupid question. But of course, usually my favorite films aren't like very special effects driven, as I don't really like the like those huge blockbusters that much. Of course, sometimes it's fun to watch them, and I like some of them, but generally, I would say, I guess we go with the latter, that films that rely more on the story. Yeah. Number 23. Have you ever seen a movie that made you laugh out loud? Well, of course, although I'm more of a kind of film watcher that even if I find a film really funny, I don't always kind of laugh out loud. I often kind of maybe smile and just chuckle a little bit or kind of laugh on the inside. I mean, I don't usually start laughing out loud when I watch movies, even if they are really funny. And sometimes I laugh more like if I'm watching films with somebody, although it's not because uh, it's more fun to watch films with somebody, but it's usually because I just feel kind of awkward when I'm watching something with somebody, and then I kind of might start laughing due to the awkwardness rather than the film. But definitely, again, a few days ago, I watched Freaky Friday for the first time, and I definitely laughed out loud a couple of times. Yeah. Number 24. Have you ever seen a movie so bad it was good? Well, plenty of them, like Rennie Harlin's The Covenant is an example. It's a truly atrocious film, but it's still funny and very enjoyable. And lots of the kind of 80s action movies like I even like the Van Damme movies and stuff. Many of them are just absolutely atrocious. Like Kickboxer, for example, or Bloodsport. Those are really bad movies, but they are really lots of fun. Or Roadhouse is a good example. It's a bad movie. Although I mean, it's kind of competently made when you look at the visuals and stuff, but there's the story, and yeah, it's very stupid. But yeah, there are many kind of so bad, it's good type of movies. Yeah. I mean, we did a podcast on one of them called From Paris with Love, and that's one of my favorite kind of guilty pleasure type of movies, or so bad it was good type of movies. Yeah. Number 25, what is the most memorable scene from a movie for you? I mean, that's kind of very hard to say, like after you have seen thousands of movies, of course, there are just so many memorable scenes from movies to me. What will I go with? Um, well, as a kid, I really loved the, again, Star Wars Episode 6, like when again Luke and Vader fight, and when again Vader decides to save Luke and throw Palpatine off. Yeah, that's like as a kid was definitely one of the most memorable. But what would be the most memorable these days? Well, I mentioned the gas station scene in the Ambrose of Sherbrooke. That's definitely up there. And we just did a podcast on the Sword of Doom by Kihachi Okamoto, and it has a kind of a fight scene in the snow involving Toshiro Mifune. So that's definitely again one of the most memorable scenes for me, and definitely something I think about a lot. But of course, there are so many that you could mention. 26, would you rather watch an old classic movie or the latest blockbuster release? Well, old classic movie every day of the week, basically. Yeah. I mean, the blockbusters these days are so bad, usually. Yeah. 27, do you like watching movies in 3D? Not really. Like when I used to go to the cinema and when I went to see a movie that you could see in either 2D or 3D, I usually went for the 2D. Uh, Although sometimes, of course, or often they had more screenings for the 3D showings. So sometimes I had to choose the 3D even if I wanted to go watch the 2D version. Like for example, the War of the Planet of the Apes, the third one. That one I went to see on 3D because the 2D showings were all on bad time for me, so I had to go see the 3D one. Yeah. But I mean, I don't mind 3D necessarily, but I usually like the kind of old-fashioned way. Yeah. 28. Do you prefer animated films or live action films? Well, I definitely prefer either one because I love watching both of them, although, yeah, I think there are more great live action films. And when it comes to anime, Japanese animation, I think lots of the best anime is in the kind of TV show format rather than the movie format. Like most of my favorite animes are TV shows than movies. So yeah, if we go went with TV shows in this question, I actually like I'm close to the point now that I might go with animated TV shows because there are more and more shows, anime shows that I love. So yeah, but I think with films, I if I had to choose, yeah, live action films, even though I like both again. What is the best movie soundtrack you have ever heard? Well, then again, so many. Some of my favorites are, for example, Kikuchiro, the Takeshi Kitano film that has a Joe Hisaishi score. Then, of course, the David Lynch films have great soundtracks like Fire Walk with Me, Blue Velvet, for example. So those are some. 30, would you rather watch a movie with friends or alone? Well, it really depends. It can be really fun to watch with friends, but of course, with friends, you often have to compromise unless you guys like, or unless you and your friends have very similar taste. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. And also depends on the movie. There are some movies that are kind of preferable to watch alone, and some might be more fun with friends. But I can like both, both. But I usually watch films alone. Yeah. 31. Are there any movie characters that you identify with? I mean, there are again plenty of them. Well, I think on January I rewatched one of my favorite films called I Killed My Mother, directed by Xavier Dolan. And he also plays the main character role, so that's definitely a character that I relate to a lot. Again, the film is about him and his toxic relationship with his mother, so I can relate to him so much. Although there are again some differences there on his character and me, of course, but yeah, he's definitely one that I relate to a lot. Yeah. And of course, there are many, like in TV shows. Taylor Townsend in the OC is actually someone I really relate to in many ways. Although I also relate to Ryan Atwood a little bit and also Seth Cohen a little bit. But Taylor Townsend might actually be the character that I relate to the most. I've kind of realized it now in the last couple of years more and more. And he's actually, or she is actually my favorite character in the OC these days. Yeah. Although is that very narcissistic of me to say because she's my favorite because she reminds me of me. So I love myself. Yeah, I don't know. Is that narcissistic? Yeah, maybe it is. Number 32. Do you feel that some movies are overhyped before their release? Well, of course. Yeah, some movies get so much hype based on the trailer, or maybe if it's a sequel to a good movie, it might get lots of hype. But yeah, of course, and often the overhype can makes you so hyped and then you are very disappointed when you go to a movie. But I tend to have fairly low expectations for many things these days so that I won't be as disappointed. Yeah. 33. Can you think of an example where a movie sequel was better than the first film? Well, there are some. Well, Empire Strikes Back that was the sequel to New Hope. I mean, they are both like great blockbusters, but I would say Empire Strikes Back is a bit better. And of course, one can talk about Terminator and Terminator 2. I've always liked the second one more, and I've always watched the second one more, but I haven't seen the first one in such a long time, so I'm not sure whether I would still say that the sequel is better. Yeah. And many people would say with like X-Men and Spider-Man, again the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, that the sequels were better, but actually with both of those franchises, I actually like the first Spider-Man more than the second one, and I like the first X-Men more than the second one. Yeah, and I'm not sure why. I'm just thinking about these really mainstream films. But again, great films usually don't get sequels, to be honest. So yeah. But yeah, what else? And I mean, if we talk about Twin Peaks, like the two series, you could argue the Return is better because it's more consistent. It's like so good front to back. Every single episode is great. But in the original series, there are some episodes that are more like filler, like in the second season and stuff. So it's not as consistent. So maybe the Return is better. Although I think you could also argue that the original Twin Peaks has higher highs, but just isn't as consistent. But yeah. 34. Are there any movies that scared you so much that you had to turn them off early? No. Again, I don't usually get that scared with movies. Like I've said many times, the David Lynch movies are basically almost the only thing that really makes me scared. But yeah, that has never happened to me. And usually, if I start a movie, I just kind of force myself to watch it, even if I don't like it. So yeah. 35. Have you ever seen a movie so good it made you want to watch it again immediately after it ended? Yeah, it happened to me many times, especially as a kid. I did that a lot, like Get Rich or Die Trying, the 50 Cent biopic. I remember I watched it once and then I watched it again. And same with the Conan sequel, which we're going to talk about on the podcast. Yeah. And then when I've been a bit older, I think Paris, Texas, I watched almost immediately after it ended. Maybe like week or 2 weeks later, so not like absolutely immediately, but very soon after watching it. Yeah. And yeah, I felt also that with some of my favorite David Lynch films like Fire Walk with Me, yeah, and Mulholland Drive and Blue Velvet and stuff. 36. What do you think makes a great villain in a movie? Well, usually it's when you can kind of understand where they are coming from, that they aren't just, oh, I'm so evil, I want to destroy everything, but they usually have a kind of a good backstory. Maybe they had like a traumatic childhood or something, so you kind of understand why they are like they are, and maybe if they have kind of good intentions from their point of view, even though they do something bad. Yeah, and of course the villains that are a bit more in the again gray area rather than just oh they are so evil. Yeah. 37. Do you like watching movies based on real life events? No, well, there were kind of similar question earlier. Like I said, if there are good movies, yeah, I don't mind that. 38. What do you think of movie remakes compared to the original films? We had that question also. Like, why are they asking them again? 39. What is your favorite movie series or film franchise? Um, no, I guess maybe Star Wars. Still, like, I still have lots of Star Wars nostalgia, even though I don't love it as much as I used to. So maybe Star Wars. Yeah. Number 40. What do you think of movie franchises and their spin-offs? No, well, usually they aren't very good because often they are just those stupid blockbusters and they are often done quite badly. So I'm usually not that into the kind of franchise type of movies, but of course I've watched some franchises and like I've gotten some enjoyment out of the Fast and Furious franchise. I used to really love them when I was younger. Yeah. 41. Have you ever seen a movie adaptation of a book that was better than the book itself? Um, well, there are ones that are kind of equal to the book, like I think Clockwork Orange or No Country for Old Men. I really liked both the book and the film in those two cases, for example, but I cannot think of one that is better than the book. Although I think if I again read like The Shining, for example, yeah, I'm pretty sure the Kubrick film is probably gonna be better than the Stephen King one, although obviously I could be wrong about that. Yeah. 42. Have you ever seen a movie that made you think deeply about life? No, well, there are so many of those types of films. Well, I mentioned The Human Condition that has done that. I think Tale of Winter from Eric Romer has done that, and so many others. So, I mean, there are hundreds of films that have done that. 43. Are there any actors or actresses that you always enjoy seeing in films? No, of course, there are many. Catherine Deneuve, Anna Karina, Alain Delon, Jack Nicholson, Lee Fullman, Max von Sydow, etc., etc., etc. Tatsuya Nakara, Toshiro Mifune, Setsuko Hara. Yeah. Do you have any favorite quotes from movies that have stayed with you? I mean, there are many. Like again, don't drink all the coke, of course, and I mean the Big Lebowski has so many. Uh, what would I mention? Now I'm kind of blanking that I'm thinking because there are so many lines in that movie. Yeah, God, I can't think of like what should I mention from that film? Yeah, shut the fuck up, Donny. But there are many more interesting lines in there as well. Yeah, say what you want about the tenets of National Socialism, dude. At least it's an ethos. So that's always been a line that I really like because it's funny. Yeah, and there are so many others. Yeah. If you could star in any movie, what movie would it be? So should we go with like an existing movie that if I could have starred in that, or should I just come up with a movie? And what movie would it be? I mean, just kind of started thinking that like if they made a movie about like a Finnish guy going to Japan for the first time, and the guy is like a Japanese fanboy like me, like that could be fun. And then obviously it would be fun to shoot that in Japan. Yeah. So that could be one out of like a plot that I just came up with. Yeah. But if we think about some existing movie, or maybe if we think about some filmmaker and if I could star in their movies, um, well, what could it be? I don't know. Like, I guess it would be some weird like slice of life film because I like those types of things. I can't really see myself in a like an action movie or thing like that. Like maybe I could be in some like quirky film with like dark humor and stuff like that. But yeah, yeah, I don't really know actually. It's hard to say. But yeah, maybe some slice of life film. Yeah. But anyway, those were the questions. Let me know your answers to these questions. You can do a response video if you want. But yeah, there were some decent questions there and some more boring ones. But anyway, thanks for watching. Don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.